strategy,
design,
marketing,
UX,
digital.
development.
This is Agencies That Build. This show is dedicated to leaders and teams that design and deploy in the digital world. My name is Jessie, and I'm a marketer and an agency owner.
And I'm Varun. I'm not a marketer, but a coder and an agency partner.
This show is sponsored by Together We Ship.
On a mission to help agencies grow.
All right, rock on. We're here. Varun, my friend, you are in a different location for today's conversation. The attic, I believe you're relegated to right now.
I am. Yes, it is attic. I mean, I'm just so annoyed by my kids running around the house all day. So
struggle is real, my friend.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to chat with our guest today. Are you ready? I'm ready. So he is a designer, a creative capital investor, labeled as one of the most successful companies in Texas by Inc. magazine. He's a mentor at Capital Factory, host of the Hustle podcast. So he is familiar with podcasting, which is always fun. The co-founder and head of design at Funsize, Anthony Armendariz. Anthony, welcome to the program. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
With an intro like that.
Thank you for all the nice things you said.
It's all you, my friend. You make it easy. So we like to start the show off with a little question around a myth you'd like to bust, a bogus strategy or misconception that you'd like to smash, something you'd like to set a record straight on. So what do you got? What do you want to clear up?
I think for me, I think the myth or that it's too difficult or too risky to invest in junior designers, I think is kind of bogus. If you look at the extraordinary amount of job positions that are open right now and how every company is hungry for talent, both for in-house jobs and agency jobs, and no one is really, they're all competing for the same staff level, principal level, lead level roles and having a really hard time filling positions, whereas there's hundreds and thousands of junior people that are highly qualified for the work that go through submit 500 applications before they can even get someone to respond to them, and then they most often don't get jobs. And I think that that's crazy, because I think that the junior designers, especially if they're career switchers and they come from adjacent creative fields, come to the table immediately with a higher equivalent or higher maturity level than most senior designers in-house have. They're hungry and passionate to do the work, and if you invest in them, they'll stay with you for a very long period of time, a lot longer than the typical 18 months that someone stays employed at a tech company in the United States. And I've seen, I know, it just breaks my heart that it's really difficult for those people to find jobs, and I often find that they're the best. Some of the best types of people that you could put inside of your design org, and I wish more people would invest in taking risks and training and giving those people a chance.
What do you think is the hesitation, by business owners, that is something that we need to smash, from your perspective?
I think a lot of it has to do with management overhead. I think people are worried that the more junior the person is, the more that's how difficult it is going to be for them to manage and guide that person along the path and get them in a position where they're contributing at the right level. But I think and that might be true for a segment of those of early career designers, but for the type of junior design that I'm talking about, I think that's a complete misconception. I've seen junior early career designers with less than 2 years or less than 1 year of experience run circles around senior designers.
What type of designers are you referring to here? Because it could be a very controversial topic for many of the companies, because I know people who would never work with the juniors because of the reasons you mentioned, that management problems and time it takes to train them and all that. And I agree with you partially as well, because we have hired many people. Like, we had an internship program, we had training programs where do recruit people who are right out of the college, but there is pros and cons of both. But in your opinion, for your industry, for the work that you do, specifically you talk about designers. So what kind of designers and what type of work do you think can be more valuable and well suited for the juniors?
I don't want to make too many assumptions about people because humans are all great, but I think the type of designer that I'm talking about is not someone that comes from university. A majority of the people that we work with that come straight from university barely know how to use a calendar or email. They may be highly talented as a designer, but they can't operate at a certain maturity level that's necessary for doing enterprise design work. Enterprise design work is more about understanding people and maturity levels and way less about the actual design work. So people that have had 5 or 10 years as a career as a web designer or as a photographer or in customer support and stuff like that with only a year's worth of experience do way better in enterprise design settings because they know how to act like big boys and big girls and facilitate discussions between stakeholders, and that's mostly what design is about, less about pixels.
It's an interesting conversation that we're having, but just in general around career pathing. I saw actually a comment on LinkedIn this morning too, in terms of where people were coming from and how they got to the roles that they were in, regardless of the industry. But the idea of people who may have been college dropouts or people who may have done other types of alternative careers early in their 20s, for lack of a better way to explain it, and where they end up in terms of leadership positions within these, whether they're agencies, organizations, or consultancies or things like that. I think it's an interesting conversation to be having within our current environments too, and the way the value is placed on people coming out of school, and I like your definition of junior being a little bit different than, career age. It's rather than, versus experience. I think the idea of coming to the table with a little bit of a different experience that provides them with I think professionalism is the right word that I'm going to use there, allows them to gain the skills and experience within, the job they need to perform, as you described. I think people discount that. It's hard to represent on a resume, is where I was headed with this.
Yeah, it is really difficult, and of course it depends on the environment, right? The team environment. Like you can't just bring on early career designers and put them on, assign them to a team. Like they have to be in environments where they're actually learning. And just guidance of like where to get the learning that they need when you can't provide it to them. So you can work to external partnerships and stuff like that. It also kind of depends on whether the work is kind of more generalist versus specialization. Like we don't expect early career designers to be really strong at visual design. For a lot of people, on average, it takes years to hone in that craft. But for people that understand that, in enterprise product design, you're mostly going to be working with a visual design language system that's already established by a company, right? So you're not being asked to like design net new visual design systems. You're asked to use that design system and solve business problems with that. And so I think it kind of you can definitely set those people up for failure. But I think that's the thing that maybe enterprise design organizations should take advantage more often, because they've invested so much in design systems and other practices that help support the orgs, like product management and all these other things. Like it is that because of some of those things, it's a little bit easier for those types of individuals to come in and contribute.
So clearly you have found some success in this process or in a way of working with junior designers. So can you elaborate more on, or maybe more specific on a type of project or a type of client that you might have worked on where you have brought on the junior designers, and how and what process did you adopt? Did they work with the senior person? What was the role for them specifically for that piece of work? How do you, how would you disalign them with the senior person, right? I mean, so that there's clear roles and responsibility for both junior and senior.
Yeah, that's a difficult question, just because there's such a variety in projects and variety of, cultural environments with clients. And so I think you kind of look at all that sort of stuff. You have to look at the person and figure out, like, on terms of the hard skills and essential skills, like where are they at, make sure that aligns with, personalities with clients, like really do personality matching, look at hard skills and soft skills.
Yeah.
If it's like, in some environments, it could be environments where like designers are discretely staffed within specific product verticals. And so then you need to rely on sort of culture to support that growth, like things that happen behind the scenes at the agency is like sparring sessions, critiques, external hands-on help from creative directors behind the scenes that are involved in the projects, or embedded leads in those projects that can kind of span those verticals to help those people grow.
Yeah.
If it's more of a standard agency project where like our team is leading the effort versus the client, then you have like design directors and design leads that are there every day. And sometimes you just have to kind of weigh that out. So sometimes we've had the luxury of taking an early career designer and putting them through into 3 different styles of engagements over a 3-month period of time to see where they're going to do best, where they're going to grow the most.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't have that luxury, and we have a specific need, and we just have to make sure that we're making a really strong project assignment from day one.
Yeah.
How do you communicate that to the designer themselves? Because there could be a level of paranoia if you're moving them around between and you're testing them out. Is there a tip or trick that you have in terms of, or do you just tell them, here's what we're doing, we think you're great, we want to try you in a couple different scenarios so we get to know what works best for you and what's best for us? Or, from a managerial standpoint, I think that's a healthy part of the conversation as well, not only the benefit of the agency, but the staff.
I wish more people would ask those kind of questions, but like I was alluding to earlier, these people are just hungry for someone to say yes to them. So it's more about like, how can I get a real job as fast as possible? Like, what is it going to take for me to do that? Because, for better or worse of the situation, by the time they've done, 6 months of real work, they're going to be far ahead of their cohort, for example, if they're GA graduates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, at least based on our team, that seems to be the sentiment. Like, how can I, like, I know that I want to work with this company. What is the best way to get my foot in the door? So I think people are pretty flexible about that. And I think that also there's less conceptions about like what to expect. Some people, when you're interviewing them, one of the probably most important discussions is the discussion of, well, do you, all things considered, knowing you have years to figure this out, do you really in your mind see yourself as an agency person or an in-house person? And that conversation right there can help determine what type of engagement or client they should work with. A lot of the engagements we have feel like agency engagements, and 50% of them, feel more like in-house engagements. So, there's things like that we use to help them figure out what to do. Like, do they think that their end game is a design agent at an agency like Funsize or someone similar, or is their end game like, getting hired by Twitter, right? That can really affect a lot of insights on the best way to grow them.
Well, it doesn't even know what the end game is. I think that's a lot of the conversation too around, not necessarily getting a real job, but getting a desired job for now and testing, seeing if you like it, does it stick? What do I do next? A lot of times in my early career, I was in-house and people kept saying, well, you can't get that job unless you work in an agency. You can't get that job. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me right now? Fine, I'll go get an agency job. It wasn't because I wanted to do it, but obviously it ended up okay because we're all having this conversation. But it's an interesting thing that the market dictates in a lot of ways too. So, Varun, did you have a question?
No,
I cut you off.
no. I think we can move on to the next one. I think this is a good conversation.
Well, then let's talk about a little bit about the structure of your organization. I know in our pre-conversation, creating a new business was something that we had talked about, whether or not whether service should be part of your offering within your organization or whether it should be a separate entity on its own. Would love to hear, maybe we start at the beginning a little bit, because I know you guys at Funsize do a couple of things. I would say more than probably a couple of things, but there was some conversation around that specifically. Would love to hear your perspective on, how do you evaluate that? Well, how is that a decision that even comes up?
I think when my wife and I started this business, we didn't really understand what kinds of decisions we'd be forced to make if we were successful. And different companies have different goals, right? Like a lot of agencies, their goal is to just keep growing, just keep growing, just keep growing. And some agency owners like realize, okay, well, we've hit the extent of the amount of growth we want to have, and that's essentially what happened with us. Like we reached a magic size where we have had deep evaluation of numbers and culture. We said, okay, this is the size where culture is the best, where we can get the right kinds of clients and the right kind of work, where we're as profitable as we can be, and you have a lot of success, right? You have key clients that want to keep working with you. Well, if you tell them no, they're going to quit. They're going to go to someone else. So how can you balance that? Well, the answer for this, well, okay, so step back. Like as an agency, we want to be hired for our expertise, because clients believe in what the kinds of results that we can produce with our methods and our people. But we also realize that most of our clients, because of the kind of clients, we primarily only work with enterprise design teams. And their number, like usually they're, a big important mission of those teams is to build these roles in-house. So a lot of companies started asking us about staff augmentation, like, can you help us, find a researcher or a product designer that can sit in this design org. We value you as an agency and the types of designers and diversity that you can find in people, but we really don't want your flavor of work. Well, we entertained that for a while, but then we realized that is just a completely different sort of culture and all that sort of stuff than what Funsize is really offering. So we did decide to break that off as a separate business so that we can continue to serve those clients and earn revenue, but not have to put our own people in those projects as it's not a cultural fit for us. And to continue to maintain long relation, like a good client for us is a client that we can continue to work with for 2-3+ years with multiple work streams in each account, and maintain that and serve the client for what they actually, on both sides of what the design leader needs. The design leader clients that we have, they need experts, they need people to do the work, but they also need to hire. So the second business is another pillar to help serve all of the needs that design leaders have. And it's, and it was just a different in all sort of aspects of mission, goal, culture, KPIs, how you measure success, financials, target, and all this, the way that a financial organization would measure success, that it just made sense to separate it out. It's really a choice of managing culture to make sure that our team stays the size that it is. It's not a decision to make more money. It's about protecting what we believe is critical.
So what is the model right now that you follow? So it's not the staff org. Most likely it's something like retainer or fixed cost projects that you do with them. How do you determine or what? How do you come about the pricing, and how do you put together your engagement model with them?
So there's two. I mean, if you just distill it down to the most simplest form, there's two kinds of clients that we work with: enterprise design teams and startups. So I'll tackle the startup stuff first because that's easier. Like with startups, the only kind of work we're interested in is early stage. Early stage work. We gravitate to female-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and we're really looking for opportunities where we can impact the initial product. The initial product that's going to go to the market, the positioning, the strategy of that product, the validation of that product, the brand of that product, and the design of that. And then we want to be done, right? Because they need to work on that in-house. Those for us, like we kind of know after 9 years of doing it, how long they take. So those are always done in like retainer, dedicated team model with a fixed weekly cost. They usually average between 8 and 13 weeks. and we use the Moscow methodology to manage the chaos of acceptance criteria. If you guys want to talk about the Moscow method, I'm happy to go into that. But it's the best way we found we can be agile and be true to form as working as the way an engineer wants to work, but managing the scope for an agency. We do not do fixed bid work at Funsize at all. Zero fixed bid work, with the exception of saying that this engagement 12 weeks is this cost, right? We anytime someone asks us for a fixed bid, it's usually sorry, we're not interested. Now the enterprise design work, these in-house teams, and it's a kind of a combination of designing new things for these people, for these organizations, or evolving these current products. So they're usually these people are thinking in terms of hiring, right? They're trying to hire. So as an agency, we position ourselves, okay, this is what our cost would be for a year, half a year, quarter, whatever. And we embed with them. We call this an allied team model. So imagine like two circles, like client organization culture and our organizational culture. The Venn diagram in the middle is this like special sauce, which we think is like culture and design management. And we believe if that's done right, we can staff and maintain work streams with these clients for multiple years without losing institutional knowledge. Because you have that model for doing work requires that both companies appreciate and understand each other's cultures, values, the way they do work, what success looks like. Clients don't want the people, both teams need to make sure the designers are motivated, growing, evolving. Are they on the right work streams, moving them around, all that kind of stuff, so that you can effectively have like an agency running work streams that outlast in-house teams by double or triple in terms of tenure. That's the two things that Funsize does. And the staff fog we are not interested in, which is why we created a different business for that. So it's not, we wanted to intentionally separate that outside of our agency, so our people know that it's different, so our clients know that it's different. And if that's what you want to buy, we'll try to help you, but we're not managing it. We're just helping you meet people, right? That's all we're doing. Like we're helping you find people that can do the work for a period of time under our MSA, and hopefully you guys fall in love with each other and you can hire them. But it's so different than Funsize, it doesn't belong in Funsize.
So that's purely a recruiting side of the business, where you are just doing staffing for the client and they deal with the customer, while Funsize is focused mostly on doing the work all in-house. And as a brand, that is what your positioning is.
Yeah, think about it on a sliding scale, like all agency work, halfway embedded with mutual responsibility for the outcomes, staff fog being clients fully responsible for it. So that's the way we sell that. And as you go through those services, the prices get incrementally more expensive, because as you go on that far right of like staff augmentation, Funsize really doesn't have much to gain from that. And we can't manage it, so it's riskier.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's kind of the summary, but like I think it's important because what we're trying to do is holistically serve design organizations, and trying not to have an ego about it, because a lot of teams don't really need agency experts. They do at times, but they need to build teams.
Yeah.
What they really need.
So, well, I'm curious to know. So you have positioned yourself very smartly and very focused on just working with enterprise design team. At what point did you realize that this is what you wanted to do, and what was the thought behind that? Did you find some success at that time? There must be something that you figured out. Like, right now people struggle with the problem of being a generalist or a specialist, and especially in the agency world, agencies tend to go after pretty much everything where the business is. Like, so there are full service dev agencies which will do strategy, design, dev, everything. And then there are design focused agencies, but still they would do every type of design. You kind of focused only to work with enterprise design. And you mentioned that was not how you started. You were like doing, many things, but at some point you did decide that this is the way you want to do it. I mean, how long did it take you to get to that point? And then that is the first part. And second part, how do you foresee the future? Like, how do you think it can, like, what's your future strategy going in that direction? Like, so I'm kind of asking two
Well,
questions together.
I think number one, I mean, different for everyone, but for us, like when we were starting out, we had to grow, right? Most of our clients were startups. There's nothing wrong with that, but startups want everything. They want it their way. They want it now, and they don't want to pay anything for it. And but the work comes with a lot of autonomy and excitement for designers, and you can do things like branding and create these things from scratch, right? So that work is important to our mix. But the thing about working with specifically selling to other design leaders is that the first sales conversation, there's immediate empathy and understanding and value of each other's position. You don't have to pitch a design leader. You do not
Yeah.
have to submit a proposal. You do not have to do these things. You just speak the same language as them, and just boom, you're gone, right? And then those companies, will fund all the exciting things you want to do, the raises you want to give your people, the company trips you want to do, the maintain, you can forecast work years in advance, exactly to the cent how much money is coming in, right? Like that's what you need, right? When you're trying to run a sustainable business, you don't want to be wondering where your billings are coming from. You want to know, how much money exactly to the cent am I making, not this year, next year? And so it's like balancing those things for us is really important. I also think that enterprise work provides a place for earlier career designers to be battle tested, because I think, in my opinion, I think you want your most senior people working on startup work, not your most junior people. So because startup founders are bonkers, nuts, insane people. They have to be to start businesses, and you have to build a certain maturity level and skill level for people to manage that well. And so there's a lot of reasons why we do this, but I think for me, it's mostly that these people understand who we are, what we do, and we don't have to prove to them that they should invest money in design. They're ready to do it, right? There's different maturity levels, like people that are, older 100-year companies that are going through design transformation that need a little bit more of something else. There's a lot of different, there's certain kinds of opportunities there, like help them learn how to do design in-house. That's great opportunity. Then you have like the Facebooks and the Instagram of the world that they believe in their mind, oh, we know exactly how to do it. And there's kind of different opportunities. But I think it's also healthy for designers working in agencies to kind of also have the experience of understanding, like, what would it feel like if I worked at Facebook? Feel like if I worked at Capital One? What if I wanted to work with these people but never moved to the Bay Area to do that? Like we're offering those experiences for people. So, like a lot of designers on our team have spent 1 or 2 years at Facebook doing work, 1 or 2 years at Volvo. Think of their resume, man. I mean, like, to do that within an agency with in-house level autonomy and trust, it's just an extraordinary sort of experience. At least the way we thought about this years ago, thinking of ourselves as a small company in Austin, Texas, where a lot of these in-house teams weren't hiring or investing in. Of course, that's a lot different now with post-pandemic, but prior to the pandemic, like how many, it's just kind of a different world.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I mentioned that because I mean the point that you mentioned, many designers can work remotely, don't have to go to the Silicon Valley to do that pre-pandemic. But now, after everybody is doing that, so that's I don't know if that is a challenge for you or not. How are you dealing with that? But I also liked your earlier point about when you talk and when you work with the design leaders, I think it's easy to sell to do because you're talking the same language, and there is less effort in selling. I mean, you are not selling, you are basically, strategizing right on the first call. So
Yep.
that makes a huge difference. I totally, agree with that. So talking about pandemic, now, how has that changed for you? Like what, is that, well, are you going in a, like, well, let me ask you simply, like, how did that change the way you have been working or you have you are working now versus earlier?
For me, it's been really stressful because we've been doing this kind of embedded work, but we used to do it every day together in the same building, right?
Yeah.
And you could still build culture, but then the pandemic happened and we were doing that embedded work separately, which creates more silos, huge dilemma, right? Because
Yeah.
for some, not everyone, but for some people that have, let's say someone has been spending a year or two on, let's say Volvo, at what point did they just think, oh, I work at Volvo? And trying to manage that is really important. Manage the identity of these teams and trying to support them in ways to help them create that identity for who they are as a squad for that client, but also how do they, where are they in the Funsize whole thing? It takes a lot more management to do that, and investment in other people in the agency that are driven to think about culture, because I think that if that's not managed well, people leave, right? I mean, especially in an environment where people at Funsize now can work in Austin for any of these companies. So there has to be a reason why they're working at an agency. That's one thing. Number two, a lot of reasons why, it's not the only reason, but a common reason why someone would choose to work at an agency is variety.
Yeah.
So the old model, I think like old Anthony pre-pandemic was like, oh, okay, they have to rotate, right? Every 6 months or so, they have to rotate clients. But I've learned that with the right trust and autonomy with these clients, that they can rotate within the clients. Like, let's say that they've done e-commerce work on Volvo for a year. We got trust on them. Maybe now they can be moved to in designing in-car entertainment systems. So if you can just work with the individual to help connect the dots for them, what does this mean for me, my autonomy level, the way that I'm growing? How can I get variety? It's just a lot more management kind of conversations. I think that we've had some attrition, but like way lower than I was predicting. We only had 2 people leave. Well, no, we had 3 people leave. One person that just decided that they wanted to just not work in product design at all anymore, and one person that decided that they want to start a business with their their brother, and then one person that decided to move on to another company. So, but I was predicting a lot higher attrition. It is something that it really keeps me up at night, because I often wonder, like, okay, if you read the articles, people say, well, expect up to 40% attrition, yada yada yada. It's like, what do you do, right? Like, does that mean you should be thinking about building a bench just in case? Like, I don't know. It's really nerve wracking, but I know that our people are being offered way more opportunities than they ever have before. And I guess my wife and I just decided that, you know what, it's not worth really stressing about. Like, if people find value in what we have here, we want to keep them and keep growing them, but we understand people will leave, and we want that to happen. Because at the end of the day, we're not trying to hoard designers, and we want people to have great careers. So I just don't know. I don't have a lot of experience in dealing with that. We've always had very low attrition, but
Probably goes back to your first comment, your first myth bust, which was, it's the junior designer bringing them in. And I think post pandemic, there's value, not necessarily financial gain, but also experience, the happiness quotient that you may get, satisfaction, job satisfaction, opportunity. It says a lot for how you treat your employees, and the authenticity that you've built and the trust that you've built there, which,
I think you're right.
I mean, that has to be it. People are, it's a question that we would never have asked 10 years ago. Tell me about your company culture. You ask that in an interview, they'd be like, what the hell? Get rid of this person. Don't. Now it's like on the short list of questions that you must ask before you take a role, and it's commonplace. So it says a lot for what you guys have built at Funsize. I mean, even looking at your website prior to this conversation, you guys do a lot of cool stuff. So
we just have to be people first, because, other than the computers we're all, it's agency is a people business. We have no IP, like we have to think about people first in as many different spectrums as possible, because that's it,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, that kind of drives everything from, like the way we build our culture, the way we staff work, the way we sell work, the way we bill, the things that we do, the reasons for, all of these decisions for us are usually based from a people first angle. And a lot of times we'll make decisions of growth and creating new services and stuff purely because someone on our team really wants to do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
3 years ago, we really didn't have a strong research or facilitation offering, and we didn't think we would do it. But we had a couple of people who are like, this is really important to me. So we're like, okay, let's go create those services. Let's build you up as leaders in those areas. So I think that, I don't know. It's really difficult for me because, it's been so long since I've worked at another agency. But I think that if you listen to the things that your people are saying and you're willing to experiment a little bit, then you can kind of keep those people and keep them motivated.
Well, it goes back to that's your differentiator in the market in terms of the talent pool, versus going to somebody like a Twitter or a Facebook or even these larger orgs where you're a cog in a wheel versus you're the one driving the car to keep the Volvo conversation going. Which leads me to another question. Have you guys explored, as you're thinking about staffing and you're thinking about various attritions and the augmentation that you do, we talked a little bit about contractors and outsourcing and offshoring.
Yeah.
Would love to hear, there's a couple of things that you guys do, I know internally, but would love to hear a little bit more about your perspective and your experiences there.
It's a new muscle that needs to be flexed, but I think it's critical to our success at this point to have partnerships with other companies. Primarily for the first thing that I talked about, we want to stay this size, right? So how can we stay this size, right? That having strategic partners will help us stay that size. Number one. Number two, like everyone else, teams are distributed. Like, people have designers in London and India and California and vice versa. And contributors on those teams need to be within a certain time zone in order to work effectively with those teams, right? So think about time zone bands,
Yep.
So that's, that's kind of new for us, right? Like that the industry is doing this in general, but then we have specific clients who are global, like Volvo was in Sweden, right? It's really difficult for us to work with the Sweden team because the time zone is too aggressive. So we've invested in strategic partners in other areas, like Iceland, for example, that are kind of closer. And I think that's going to be working with strategic partners, agencies, various strategic partners to do this is going to be radically imperative to our success. Being that our measure of success is maintaining the size of this business, not the financial growth of this business. But I think that having those partners also has having partners will have a financial benefit as well. So it's just something that's new. Like I said, new muscle. Like it's weird for us, because we used to do everything in house, and you get an opportunity comes in the sales pipeline. We're used to saying, well, can we take it or not? What we're trying to learn now is like, okay, before we just say, no, we can't take it. Like, can we? Like, can we work with this group to help us do this? Can we work with this group? Like, and it's just, it's one of those things that just, you have to practice doing it if you've never done that before. It's not the thing that comes to your mind first if you're not used to doing that.
Well,
but I think it is important.
As you think about that, though, I think, part of our conversation was when you talk about contractors and outsourcing and offshoring, even, our minds generally go directly to engineering in those roles. But I think one of the things is you don't always have to go to engineering, right? There's options for designers. There's, I think you guys have mentioned that a lot of us outsource our finances as another ones.
I think the word offshoring is just weird. Like to me that it sounds like, oh, someone else is just going to do the work instead of like, let's do this together, but in different countries.
Yeah. I like to outsource is a much more appealing term.
And I guess outsource does make sense, right? There's going to be lots of people that do really rely on something just to drive it. I can see that happening for us, but I think for us, it's probably more about like, how can we expand the global network of designers that can work with us? Not, okay, just give all the work to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but I think it's, for me, Yeah, I think it is. I think it's important. I don't. I don't know a lot of people personally that have a lot of experience in like working with other strategic partners. Um, but I
Well,
think I think it's really important.
yeah, it's especially, as Jesse was telling earlier, like design is something that not many agencies or companies in general prefer to outsource. They like to keep everything in-house because for some reason, which I'm also not able to figure out yet. I mean, we talk to many agencies, um, and we work with many agencies as well. And typically, the type of work that they look forward to outsource is engineering, is development work. They would look for design everything inside in-house, have their own people do initial work, but then when it comes to implementation and execution, they look for outsource because that is how things have been run before. But you know and you're also like thinking about doing, you have never done that before, this is like new thing for you as well to explore, so it would be interesting to see how that goes, and I would continue to have the conversation once you start doing that and see how was your experience, because that is one area where I think there's huge potential for some of the companies who can leverage, because there are good designers everywhere, and especially
Everywhere.
after
Yeah.
pandemic, things are opening up very fast. So
I
Well, it
think it
could
also
be.
has like diversity benefits, right? Like, I mean, if a team is only like, hiring like in-house in California, that's a problem. If people are only hiring in the United States, that's a problem. Like if you're designing global products, surely you want a global representation of like, for example, if you're Uber, surely you want designers that are in India that understand the unique conditions of what it's like to try to find a car in India, which is very different than trying to find a car on a city street in an American city.
yeah.
So I think like bursting those bubbles, it brings more perspectives to the table. It's kind of cool that people are thinking about this now, like having distributed teams and stuff. It kind of sucks that it took a pandemic for that to happen.
Well, I would agree with everything you said there. I think there's a competitive advantage even in pitching work, or acquiring work, or confirming work, depending on what you're pitching, that you can bring to the table with a more global approach to it. I mean, we keep talking about Volvo and being, you know, I have not been to Sweden, so I would have to learn pretty quickly if I were going to work on an account like that. Or I have owned a Volvo, but that's the extent of my experience with the brand and what it's, feels like. And so it would be interesting to be it creates an opportunity for people to be able to give just a more global perspective. I know
Yeah.
it's like I love watching the advertisements during the Olympics. I know this podcast recording is evergreen, but we're watching the Olympics right now. I'll timestamp it like that. So it's just fun to kind of watch who invests in the Olympics and watching, because those are global platforms in a lot of ways, what ads and how they represent things and what's come out of the pandemic there too.
Yeah,
So
and it's also responsible for teams, right? Like if you're working like we also do work with like a computer manufacturer, and they have designers everywhere.
mm-hmm.
And I think it's responsible within limitation to ask your team to be available to the client within certain windows, right? But like there's an extent of what is could be like really draining on someone. Like no one in Austin, Texas wants to be having meetings at like 6 a.m. Um, I think it's better. Like, I guess all I'm saying is I love this idea of like building teams that are within like windows of time across the global bands, so that
Yeah.
people, because this product design work, you can't just do in a void. You can't design something and then give it to engineering. You got to work with engineering every day, every
Yeah.
single day, every day together, like talking all day long, every day. And so I love that could be possible. And yeah, like it's a lot of company, especially small agencies like ours, have not developed a muscle for recruiting globally, right?
Mm-hmm.
A client says, "Oh, you have designers that are close to like in like China time zone." No, we don't. And how would we find anyone? Like we can't recruit like that. So yeah, it's difficult. Um,
Well, it's interesting too that the time zone piece, that is a question that we come across frequently in terms of like, does your team work within this time zone? Again, it goes back to being able to say yes to work that's more interesting to you with a global approach to it. A global approach being, people who are situated across the planet. And you're able to say yes because you do have a human or you do have a partner who's based within the time zone so you can work collaboratively.
With some overlap. Yeah.
Right, with some overlap, but also the pandemic has forced us to think about, hiring in general to the earlier part of the conversation where you don't have to be in Austin, Texas, you can be wherever to be able to accommodate, it goes back to hiring junior designers. It all goes back to your original myth, come in full circle there. You can open up the doors and find talent in different places. So I'm going to ask you a question about the future. So what for you, as we look ahead into what's coming, as this pandemic changes the way that we're kind of working in the world, what's exciting for you about the future? What are you looking forward to? What's coming up that you're like, yes, outside of week 2 of the Olympics?
I think a lot of people would disagree with this or may decide that they want to not live in this future. But I firmly believe, without a doubt, that the future of design work is a symbiotic relationship between agencies and in-house teams and freelancers. It's too absurd to think that in-house teams can just hire in-house. Therefore, it's also absurd to think that in-house teams can only rely on agencies. And therefore, it's absurd to think that agencies can only hire in-house. That, I think all these people live in this future where everyone works together. They're different companies, but they have a singular mission and they work together every day. They don't lob stuff over the fence. They work together every day as a way to, this is the demand coming from the industry. The agencies think this way. And then, it's really important. I think, and I'm talking about product. I'm talking about software design, things that revolve around conversations with other people to make decisions about product. I'm not talking about like designing websites or things like that. I'm talking about things that take a lot of building group work. And so I think that more than anyone expects, those 3 kinds of people will be necessary for each other to have for them to continue to meet the goals that they're trying to meet. And I don't know if a lot of agencies want work that way or accept that. But I do think it's the future, like it or not.
How would you best recommend those 3 parties get along based on your experience? If that's the future vision, and I'm not going to disagree or agree, although I agree. How do you see that working? What tips or tricks do you have if people are moving towards that? How do you make that work?
I might be oversimplifying this, and but it's just a different tax form. Like, in my opinion, if someone is a freelancer on our team, they're still a part of our team. They just pay their own taxes. Like if we're embedded with our clients for 2 or 3 years, and that's double the tenure of their employee, what makes us different than their team member? We're just an expense that they can shut off easier, and we pay a different tax form. Like I think that it used to feel like these very strict boundaries, but I think that it behooves everyone to blur those lines, because think about it like this: like if you're a in-house team that has been asked, by the end of this year you will fill 56 design positions, and every company in the world is competing for the same ones. I mean, come on. I mean, there's ways to do this now that don't require like giving away equity or always doing this or that. Just think outside the box, like agency partners, strategic partners, freelancers. And then of course your agency partners are going to need the same, right? Everyone's augmenting, and it's just constant augmenting. And I think that is what at least in my world of doing digital product design looks like.
So, piggybacking on that, I would like to also hear your thoughts on what do you look for in a strategic partner or a freelancer who is not part of your local in-house culture. You know, when you said they will work very well together, at least that's the future you see, and you have worked with some of these strategic partners across the globe already, at least to some extent. What do you look forward? Like, what is your expectations from them? How do you pick? How do you choose who is a good fit for you?
Well, we're a small family-owned business with a cultural mindset, so I want strategic partners I can dream with. It needs to be more about projects and rates. It needs to be more like, how can we do we really like each other enough that we want to have dinner together? That's really critical. Can we go beyond the business relationship and strategize about building business opportunities for people? Do we care about each other's companies? To me, it has to be that, because there's no reason to just do something for a financial gain. Like again, like Natalie and I don't make any decisions based on finance. It's all about culture add, and we won't do anything that's not a culture add. So, like for example, if we have a strategic partner in Iceland, Ale, we just launched his episode today. It's a great partnership because they work well with our team. They have also hired us, and we work well with their team. And we travel to each other, and we have dinner, and we dream about the future together. That's what we look for.
Right. Cool.
Well, this is a great. Oh, did you have another question?
I'm just going to talk outside work. What else do you do? What what are your passions? Like, what are you passionate about? What do you do?
I am super excited to be a dad. I have a 3-year-old, so it's kind of weird for me to, like, it used to just be all about work, but over the last 3 years I've learned about this dad thing. So, I love hanging out with my son.
This dad thing.
Yeah. I'm super interested in beer. Like, I love beer. I just love the taste of it, tasting beer and whiskey. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like a lush, but I just really love, like, learning about the process and the people that make this stuff. And
What's your preference? Which one? If you had to pick any beer.
Oh, my favorite beer is Jellyfish by Pint House Pizza. Actually, it's called Electric Jellyfish.
That's a cool job, is to name beer. Like, it's like naming ice cream. Like, where do I get that job?
I'm pretty simple. I wish I had hobbies and stuff like that. Like, I don't. I've thought, like, why don't I have hobbies? What's wrong with me? But I don't know. I'm just kind of when I'm not working, I'm just thinking about my family and how to, build the future for the family, trying to keep that balance with the business. And I don't really know, because, like, I feel like I still got a few years left in me, but I'm trying to, it's weird when you go over the hump, right? When you're like, you spend your first 20 years in the industry, like, learning and perfecting a skill. And then you find yourself on the other side of the hump, and you start realizing, oh, now I got to design the next 18 years, because now I need to design my retirement plan. So, like, I've just been in that mode, like, how do I start designing the end of my career?
Well, 3-year-old kid in the house will give you no time to think about all that. It took me 7 years. I have a 7 and 3-year-old, and it, like, only after, in this pandemic, I realized that I'm more passionate about doing hiking and stuff. I started doing that after COVID, and one of my kid is 7, so now I have some time to think about myself and things that I want to do. But yeah, it's difficult
I
sometimes.
think that's one of the nice things that came out of COVID. Is like, it's giving you time back. Like, I know the traffic in Austin isn't as bad as it here, and we're in Boston. And we used to spend hours in the car every day commuting to and from work. I don't think we realized how invasive that was in our lives. And it's
Traffic in Boston is legit.
it's brutal,
That is
man. But it goes back to your hobbies. It's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I don't hike like he does, but I walk a lot. Spend a lot of time with my 12-year-old dog. I don't have any kids, but fur friends. So, but I have one final question. How did you come up with the name Funsize? Because that is an absolutely killer agency name.
Let's see.
that a loaded
So,
question?
I was working as a freelancer, and my wife was working remotely for an agency called Fjord at the time that we moved to Austin. And I convinced her that we should start a business together. And then I had a list of all these names. Like I'd always like gravitated to names for agencies that sound like super scientific. Like I used to work at a company called Behavior Design. I thought it was just the most badass name. Or like these other like other agencies like Method, right? I thought they were just ridiculously cool, this sort of scientific angle. And my wife was like, nope, we're going to call it Funsize, or I'm not going to join this business. But what Funsize is this idea of it's kind of an oxymoron kind of concept. Like a lot of people didn't know this, but like my wife and I had been had a focus on mobile design before the industry moved in that direction. So like it was this idea that we would have meetings with people, and people like, oh, well, you're just two people, you're kind of small and insignificant. And they would see the brands that we work with and the work they did, and they'd be like, wow, right? Like that name that intentionally sounds like small and insignificant, but like can do really big things. And it was also a nod to the mobile form factor, because like in the beginning, we only did mobile work. And I think that we found ways to just grow that over time, like the way we think about, teams and stuff like that. But that's really what it was. The only downside to our name that people will put a space between fun and size, or capitalize the S, and then we have to correct them. But yeah, that's kind of where the name came from.
It's a good one. It makes me think of Funsize Snickers bars, So it's good. Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today, Anthony. It was a pleasure. It's a good chat. So where people can find you. So the list is on the LinkedIn, on the Twitter. Your Twitter account also got a fun name, my favorite shape. So your company website, funsize.co, and then you have a podcast as well that we'll highlight here too. If you want to tell us a little bit, take a quick second, tell us a little bit about your podcast, Hustle. Give a little promo.
Podcast has been like a 7-year journey for me, just to explore the world of product design with people that were focused on building teams, and asking the same question. So I usually talk with people who are kind of in the same space as me, trying to figure out how to build teams, predict the future, build culture, design operations and things like that. And yeah, it's crazy. Like it's been going for many years, about to hit 100 episodes. I'm trying to figure out what's next. Do I keep that podcast going? Do I stop doing it? Do I do something different? So I'm kind of in figure that out. So please give it a listen, and feel free to reach out if you know anyone that should be on the show.
Sounds good. And people can find that at funsize.co/hustle. So thank you so much. That's it, everyone. If you learned something today or laughed, tell someone about the podcast. Varun, it was a pleasure as always. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Thanks for listening. Find our other episodes on agenciesthatbuild.com. Plus, we're listed anywhere you find your favorite podcast.